joins in. I just put the story up on Instagram as well. I saw one person in the waiting queue earlier, but they seem to have left now. Okay, let's see if we have any participants or if it's just going to be me speaking in front of the camera tonight. Either way, it would be nice if it was an interactive session. I was planning on doing a Q&A at the end, but this works too, I guess. So the reason why I chose to do a live stream is because there's quite a few things to go through, and covering it in a reel or a few stories just wouldn't do the topic justice. And I figured this would be more fun doing it live. So, okay, I see one person has joined. Funksai, is that Snehal? Yes, hey, thanks for joining. Welcome to the stream. I was just waiting for a few people to join in so I can start speaking about what happened. But looks like it's just you and me for now. Okay, that's all right. You continue, brother. Yes, I will. Thank you. Hopefully, more people will join in as we continue. Okay, so where do we start? I'm sure you guys must have seen that article that I shared, and you may also have come across a few news articles and even more Instagram posts. Also, a bunch of celebrities and influencers and even doctors just talking about this. And a lot of news articles and Instagram posts in particular, making it seem like the FDA has approved the use of BPC-157 and these other experimental peptides. Okay. Also, for those of you who don't know what BPC-157 or peptides are, don't really need to worry too much about it. But peptides are basically a group of short chain amino acids. Okay, you think of them like proteins, but not exactly. So proteins are like 3D and peptides are 2D, and they're a little shorter and smaller compared to proteins from a chemical structure. But none of that really matters. What we're seeing people use a lot of peptides for recently, uh, they have a bunch of different use cases. BPC 157 is a peptide which is used primarily for tissue regeneration. There's also some gut health benefits, like it's used for treating ulcerative colitis. That's the oral form. The tissue repair and joint health related uses are mostly with the injectable subcutaneous version. But basically, these peptides have been around for a while. There's not a lot of data on them, but they've become very popular in the evidence based. I shouldn't say evidence based because the use of these compounds is not based on evidence, but they've become very popular in this fitness space, the health, longevity, fitness. People really seem to like what these peptides are doing, and they're very enthusiastically using it and promoting it, especially after the recent success of the GLP-1 RAs, your Ozempic and Mounjaro, right? Those are also peptides. Um, so ever since they became approved and people started seeing really good results with them, that's further encouraged people to experiment with different types of peptides. Um, that doesn't mean it's a good idea or it's wise thing, because just because these all of these compounds are peptides doesn't mean they all do the same thing or work the same way or are equally safe. Okay, every compound that we use must be viewed on a case by case basis. We need to see everything individually, and we need to know what the pros and the cons are of using these compounds, and we need to have enough good quality data to make that decision, to make a responsible decision on whether to use them or not. Okay. Uh, but that's basically a small recap on peptides, I guess. But with BPC-157 in particular, and a few other experimental peptides, I think there were 7 total peptides which were being discussed in that meeting that happened. So the FDA has these advisory panels, and one of the advisory panels, which was discussing these peptides, they basically voted to include BPC 157 and 6 other peptides. I think there was TB500, MOTS-C, KPV, and a few others. So, what the panel basically said was, let's include these peptides into a list that's called 503A list, which doesn't mean they're approved. Okay. That list basically allows these peptides to be uh, dispensed, so compounded and dispensed by certain special pharmacies called compounding pharmacies. Okay, and these pharmacies are not like the regular ones where you just walk in, hand them a prescription, and they have a drug ready, an already approved drug, and they hand it to you. Right? It's not that. Compounding pharmacies prepare the medicine for you on prescription, and there's a few reasons why this system exists. Okay, so like I mentioned, these peptides, uh, they want to add them. So the panel's recommendation was to add them to a list called 503A list. Okay, so what that basically is a list of bulk ingredients from which compounded medicines can be prepared. That doesn't mean all the ingredients listed there are FDA approved. Okay, and you might be thinking, isn't this kind of weird? Why does this exist? So there was a very specific reason why this was brought into place, or why this list exists. Okay, in which topic you describing, bro? I'm speaking about peptides and the recent discussion that happened with the FDA panel on including peptides into a certain list, which makes it more accessible to people in the United States. Okay, so the 503A list exists for a very specific reason. So let's say that you're a patient in a hospital and you need a certain medicine. Okay, but the commercially available products, they have certain ingredients. So you would have seen tablets, they use a certain film, a coating, colors. So let's say there's some ingredient besides the medicine which is used to make the tablet that the patient is allergic to, and they can't have any of the commercially available ones. So then what do they do, right? So that's what the 503A pathway was for. So then the doctor writes them a prescription to get a compounded medicine, to get that drug delivered to them. Maybe it's a custom dose. Okay, so maybe the commercially available doses are not what the patient requires, or maybe they're allergic to one of the ingredients, like I mentioned. So to basically circumvent all these problems, the doctor writes them a prescription to get it compounded for them specifically. And then they take that prescription and give it to one of the compounding pharmacies. And these pharmacies, they basically have the raw ingredients with them, and they will prepare it for the patient. They'll compound it for the patient as per the prescription. And they'll only make that much and they'll only hand out that much to the patient. Okay, so that's basically why this list exists in the first place. There's also something called 503B list, which is it's pretty much the same thing, but it's for larger manufacturing facilities. So instead of one patient taking their prescription and getting their medicine, this is to this is for manufacturing facilities who make the medicines in a large batch, and then they can ship it out to clinics and things like that, and they can further dispense them. But small difference, not very relevant, but just something I thought I'd mention. Okay, so that's the list which these peptides have been proposed to be added to. Okay, uh, the FDA hasn't really accepted the panel's recommendation. They can choose to reject it as well. So far, it's only the panel that has recommended it to the FDA, and that's under review. Okay, but You need to understand why this is a little bizarre. All right. So there is a system like the 503A list which exists, but that's mostly for ingredients that have been around for centuries or decades. Okay, that have been used, that have a robust clinical history of use. Right. So things like certain vitamins or minerals, mineral salts. So these things, they are not really FDA approved through the process, which I'll go through. So there's a process which you need to follow. It's a very rigorous process in order to approve a new drug. You need to conduct multiple human trials, preclinical studies, and then you need to run that by the FDA, and they need to review it. And there's like a rule making policy in the end. So it's a very rigorous process. Okay. But for certain compounds which have been used clinically for decades, uh, those compounds have been added to the 503A list, and we do have good data for these compounds. But something which is so novel, which we don't really know a lot about, okay, like an experimental peptide like BPC-157, which hasn't been around for very long. So adding something like this to the list is pretty much unprecedented. It doesn't happen. Okay, and a lot of people on the advisory panel were people who either consult with these companies who could benefit from manufacturing these peptides, or are somehow tied to these companies. Normally, it's a panel of researchers and academics. So that was also something quite strange. Uh, but the reason why we need to be a little, not a little, we need to wait a little and be very cautious with this is because, let's say, it does get added to the list. So that makes it easier for people to access it, because right now they're relying on gray market suppliers, which are mostly Chinese. Okay, so you don't really know where your stuff is coming from and what you're actually injecting. And the second thing is, and probably the more important thing, we just don't have enough data. Okay, the human evidence is close to none. There are zero randomized control trials for, I'll just speak about BPC-157, but even for the other peptides mentioned, there are basically zero randomized control trials, and we simply don't know. What we have is animal data, and that looks very promising. We have we have we have certain mechanistic concerns, but we also have some in vitro cellular data, okay, which shows some benefits. But the one human study that we do kind of have, even that's very poorly conducted. It was a pilot study where they basically injected people with BPC-157 who had a certain knee issue. And then they called them up and asked them, "How's your knee doing?" after a few weeks, and that's how they collected the data. So that's not good. Okay, we need proper randomized control trials. We need um, robust human evidence to make sure that we understand what the risks are associated with the use of this compound. So right now we don't even know whether there are we don't know what the risks are. Okay, but that doesn't mean that it's safe. That just means we haven't found anything yet because we haven't looked properly. So if you're wondering what the process is, right, to get a drug approved, then it's like I mentioned, it's quite rigorous. So first, the sponsor company, they need to file an investigational new drug thing to the FDA. Okay, they need to say, look, we're working on this drug. So, and the company also needs to conduct a few studies beforehand. They need preclinical data. They need animal studies. They need cellular studies. So how the compound reacts with cells in a petri dish, and then they inject animals with it and observe the effects there. They conduct pharmacokinetics. So basically, how the drug is absorbed, metabolized, eliminated from the body, right? So this is all before it's tested on humans. Okay. So if that looks promising, and if there is a need, and if if there is actually a necessity for this treatment. So the standard protocol has a few gaps, or there could be an improvement. If it seems promising enough, then the human studies will be approved and greenlit. And there are three phases to this. Okay, so there's phase one trials, phase two, and phase three. And it's not too complicated. So basically, the phase one trials, they have a bunch of healthy volunteers. It's usually a smaller sample size. Okay, it's around usually less than 100 participants, and they're all healthy. So what they're trying to find in the phase one trials is this compound reasonably safe, and is it how well tolerated is it in general? If a healthy person takes this, how much can they take? Is it well tolerated, and can we deem this as reasonably safe? That's what they're trying to find out. Once it clears the phase one trials, then they move on to the phase two trials, which basically they're trying to answer, is this compound, like, what is the most effective dose? So they might test out different doses. And these trials don't need to be randomized, controlled, placebo controlled trials, because the company might just trying to be might just trying to be uh, might just be trying to find what the most effective dose is. So they may be just comparing different doses against each other instead of a control group. Okay, and this usually has more participants. So the phase one, phase two, phase three, the trials, the number of participants progressively gets greater and greater. Okay, so in phase two, it's a few hundreds. So you can say anywhere between 100 to 300, 400 participants. And these guys actually have the issue. So let's say I'm testing out BPC-157. I'm not going to get 100 healthy guys. I'm going to get a bunch of people who have a certain issue. So let's say they have some sort of tendinopathy, and that's what I'm trying to see. How does this improve their condition? And then I test out a bunch of different doses, and then we try to see what the side effects are. That's also another key feature of this phase. So that's another thing they're trying to find out. If it clears this phase, then it's moved on to the phase three trials. And here they're going to basically make sure that it's actually efficacious, and they're going to see the long term effects, and whether it's truly safe. And once this is also complete, and we have a decent amount of data to demonstrate that yes, this compound is efficacious and it is safe in the short term and the long term, and we know that this dose is safe, this dose is well tolerated, and we what are the side effects that accompany the use of this compound. So once we have a bunch of data, then the FDA will and also this is not just for the US or the FDA, it's pretty much similar for most regions in the world. The whatever regulatory body there is, I'm just going to say FDA because that's what we're speaking about. uh Deepak says, oops, late to the stream. No worry, you didn't no worry, you didn't miss a lot. It is getting hot in here. Okay, so yeah, once they have all that data, the FDA will, or the regulatory body is going to conduct a big review of everything. They're going to do a risk to benefit ratio analysis. They're going to compare it with the standard method of treatment. Usually that's covered in the phase three trials, but uh, they're going to review that. And then if there is a large enough benefit, it will be greenlit, and then the company can manufacture it and call it FDA approved and sell it all over. So that's the actual process, and companies burn like hundreds of millions of dollars on this. And in fact, a lot of drugs, they're just abandoned midway because they couldn't make it through. Um, Even with the success stories that we see, right? Because people think, oh, GLP-1 RAs did so well, they are peptides, so maybe these other peptides are also promising. Even if you consider other compounds within that GLP-1 RA umbrella, for every Ozempic, every Monjaro, every semaglutide, that's the name of the drug, for every trizapatide, we have so many drugs that failed, that didn't clear these, that that didn't gain approval. Could be because of any reason, but maybe there were safety issues, maybe there was an efficacy problem, right? Uh, but the whole point of this explanation is we need to wait a little, okay? Because right now, all we have with BPC 157 are anecdotes. They are very positive, as anecdotes usually are, and maybe it does work, okay? But we don't know for sure. We need to conduct randomized control trials to make sure that this compound works and that it's safe. Also, with, let's assume that it does work. We don't know what the safety considerations should be. Okay, we don't know how safe this product is, right? Uh, so again, lack of good quality human evidence, which is very important. We need that. Okay, and with anecdotes, we have seen this with other compounds in the past as well. In the fitness industry, we have this. Unfortunately, a lot of people just have a habit of hyping things up in the fitness industry. When the anecdotes are positive, there tends to be a bit of a snowball effect, and everyone's on the hype train. But then when we actually see the data, we see that it doesn't really do anything, or if it does, it has a bunch of nasty side effects which we don't really want. Okay, Deepak says semaglutide is FDA approved, but not for cosmetic weight loss for type 2 diabetes. Yeah, exactly. Semaglutide is FDA approved, and we have a lot of data on semaglutide. We have good quality, we have long term human data on semaglutide, right? BPC 157, we have anecdotes, we have animal data, we have one very poorly conducted pilot study, maybe more than one, but the one I'm familiar with, very, very poorly conducted, and zero RCTs so far. Okay. And RCTs are important, man. There's a reason why they're considered the gold standard. And uh, so basically, for those of you who don't know what an RCT is, it's a randomized control trial. Okay, it's the way we make sure that something actually works, and it's not just because of the placebo effect or some other confounding factors. With BPC 157 also, if you just leave your injuries alone for a while, they become better. Okay, so you don't know whether it's the BPC or whether it's just time or a bunch of other things that you might have been doing during that time period. Okay, with RCTs, we basically ensure that yes, the exposure is what is causing the effect. Are these RCTs blinded now? They can be blinded. So ideally, they should be blinded. They should be double or triple blinded. So for those of you who don't know what blinding is, I'll probably have to explain what an RCT is first. Okay, so this is going to be insightful. Okay, I'm going to run you through very quickly what a randomized control trial is, and then we'll get to what blinding is along the way. Okay, so let's take the BPC example only. Okay, let's say I want to test out, I want to conduct a study. So I've been saying, oh, okay, we need human data, right? Okay, let's say I'm testing it out on a bunch of humans. So I want to make sure, first I have to define what I'm looking for, right? I can't just be injecting people and like not know what I'm looking for. So we have to define what the objective is. The research question is what they call it. And that's going to be, does BPC 157, or let's say, is BPC 157 effective for treating tendinopathy? Okay. Or like a tendon injury or ligament injury, whatever it is, one of those things. Okay. So let's say a knee or like a minor ACL tear, something like that. Okay. So that's my question. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a bunch of people who have been diagnosed with this condition. with a whatever the condition I mentioned. Okay, so let's say I get a hold of 100 people. Okay, with that condition. Now, I'm not just going to start injecting them randomly. Okay, first we have to divide these people into a couple of groups. So we also have to make sure that they don't have any um, other diseases which may slow down their healing process. Like for example, if you have diabetes, okay, your wound healing and your the other processes also, they're going to be a little slower. Okay, even if you have hypertension, let's say, it could affect your healing. So we don't want any of that. We don't want any known interferences. So you're going to select people who fall under that category. Then you're going to divide them. Okay, so I've taken 50 people. I'm going to assign them to two groups now. Okay, one group is going to get BPC-157 injections. One group is going to get placebo, which is most cases just a regular saline injection. Okay, so I won't just pick up people and put them according to how I like into these groups. Okay, they need to be randomized. And what that means is I'm basically going to do a coin flip now. Okay, so I have 100 people. Okay, I'll take the first person, I'll do a coin flip. Heads, you go to this group, first group. Tails, you go to that group. So I'm going to they don't do it like that. They have more sophisticated methods to do that. They have random number generators which assign these participants to either uh, the control group or the BPC group, okay, the treatment group basically. So everything else that they receive in form of treatment is going to be the same. The only difference is going to be one person gets the BPC 157 injection, the other person gets regular saline injection, okay, and even the form of administration should be the same. You can't be giving pills to one person and injections to another. Okay, so every other aspect of the treatment remains the same. And so once I've divided the participants into the two groups, okay, here's where blinding comes in. So if it's an open label study, everyone knows, okay, everyone knows, the participants know that they're being assigned to the BPC group. They know that they're getting, then there's no, they know that they're being assigned to the saline group, okay. There's no point of having a control group then. And there's something called a single blind test. So here the participants don't know that they have whether they've been assigned to the BPC 157 or the placebo group. This is like the bare minimum. Okay. Then we have something called double blind, where the researchers don't know and the participants also don't know who is receiving the treatment and who's receiving placebo. These are better because we eliminate the risk of biases creeping in. And there's something called triple blind where the guy who's analyzing the data also doesn't know. Okay, so these are the different types of blinding protocols. And the reason why blinding is done is to basically uh, eliminate the risk of biases creeping in. Okay, and the reason why we're randomly assigning these participants to these two groups is so that we are basically creating two balanced groups. Okay, in terms of let's say there's participants of different ages, gender, sex, and there may be other confounding variables which we don't know about. So let's say some participants may be exercising regularly, they might be healthier, um, they may have healthier habits which will confound and affect the results. So we're trying to balance out everything else between the two groups so that the only major difference is going to be one group getting BPC 157 and one group not getting it or getting the placebo. So once that is done, then we inject them and then we follow up. We see how their Hawthorne bias, yeah. So then we inject these guys with either the treatment or the placebo, depending on whichever group they belong to, and then we follow up with them. We observe. For this example, they'll take MRIs after a few weeks. Whatever the treatment protocol is, everything else remains the same. So this way, we are actually, if one group starts doing better, significantly better than the other group, and that's the BPC-157 group, then we can say with full certainty that, yeah, okay, this compound is working. It actually does what people claim, or rather, yes, it does improve this condition. It is useful in the treatment of whatever the condition we had defined initially. Okay. So that, and not just one study, this needs to be replicated over multiple different studies, and these take time, they're expensive to conduct, um, but that's basically what we need. Okay. And we need a lot of it, and we basically don't have anything right now, and because we don't know about the side effects, we're just going into it blind. And let's assume that, okay, sure, BPC is safe and it does what it's supposed to do. Where are you going to find good quality BPC 157? How do you know that the product you're getting is actually of good quality? It's been manufactured in a facility that abides by certain standards. All you have right now is hope. Okay, you're getting it from some random Chinese supplier because, by the way, all the API manufacturers, the most popular ones, they're all in China. Okay, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but we don't really know much about where these ingredients are coming from. Okay, even let's say now the compounding pharmacies, right, in the US, like I mentioned. So let's say FDA uh, approves it, not approves it, FDA adds it to the list, the 503A list. So where do these compounding pharmacies get it from? They don't make it themselves. Okay, they have to purchase it from an API manufacturer. API is active pharmaceutical ingredient. Okay, the BPC 157 powder, raw material, that they have to get from an API manufacturer. And the top three manufacturers that I'm aware of are all based out of China. Okay, there's no reputable lab in the US making BPC 157. They do make other peptides, mostly the GLP-1RA drugs. But that's one of the biggest issues, okay, because there are so many things that can go wrong. Whenever you're, like, forget about taking pills, or this is something you're injecting into your body. Okay. The quality standards that need to be met are very high, okay, and you just don't know what's happening. So even with the 503A pathway, let's say you want to get it from a compounding pharmacy. Okay, that's actually going to solve the quality problem to a certain extent. Okay, because these guys are expected to abide by certain manufacturing standards, certain quality standards, and there are actually checks that happen. So if the compounding pharmacy wants to dispense it to you, they don't just like buy the ingredient from the API manufacturers and like dispense it to you as it is. Okay, they do a bunch of quality checks. So the API manufacturers themselves, they have their own set of manufacturing processes called good manufacturing processes, something they have to abide by. They need to have trained personnel. They need to maintain hygiene standards. They need to make sure that there's no contamination. It's actually BPC 157 that they're producing. There's no bacterial growth, no fungal growth, bioburden. And then they send it out. They have a certificate of analysis, which they have for every single batch, okay, that they send out. Then the compounding pharmacy does a test of their own of whatever incoming ingredients they have. They make sure whether whatever the API manufacturer has given them is actually BPC 157. So they test for identity, they test the potency, they test for impurities. There are multiple different um, tests that these guys conduct. And once they make the drug, So they take the raw material and let's say they make a capsule or a vial with injectable BPC-157. They're going to do a finished product testing as well. Okay, so there are a bunch of different steps involved, and they maintain records of every single step. They maintain a record of the the qualifications of their manufacturers also. Okay, so if it gets added to the 503A compounding list, the quality problem may be solved. But right now, it's you're just hoping that you're getting BPC 157 and you're hoping that it's of good quality. And it's a completely unregulated substance. Okay, there's so much nonsense that happens with substances that are regulated. Food is regulated, supplements are regulated, pharmaceuticals are regulated. And yet we see issues with all these products, but at least there is some level of liability there, right? Let's say you get a bad drug, you can at least sue the company and get some money. Okay, if you shoot up some random Chinese peptide and then you end up dying, who, you're screwed. Like, your family is not going to get money, you can't sue anyone, that's entirely on you. Okay, and this has happened, by the way. I'm not saying it's the BPC 157 that killed you. It could be anything else, okay, because you don't know what's there in that vial. There's simply no way of knowing. You just have to go off of blind trust, and that's that's very foolish. Okay, it's entirely avoidable. And even for what, like the conditions that these peptides are treating, the BPC 157. Okay, we have so many other well studied compounds that we can use for joint support and recovery. We have things like collagen peptide, we have glucosamine and chondroitin. Okay, given they may not be as potent as people claim BPC 157 is, because again we don't know whether it's as potent as the anecdotes make it out to be, because anecdotes usually exaggerate these things, as we have seen in the past as well. I mean, I hope it works, okay, but these are things we need to be cautious about. But we have safer compounds and safer therapies that have a lot of data. Red light therapy is also another one. A lot of great human data on that. And if you just give it some time, take your time if you're injured, do what you can with the resources that you have, use the supplements that we have a decent idea what they do, and the ones which have a good track record, and wait it out. Okay, you're not really missing out on much, because at the end of the day what it buys you is time. Okay, BPC 157 will help you heal a few months earlier, few weeks earlier. That's all right. You take your time and wait until we have better data on this and until it becomes approved. So we don't just need data, we need it to become an approved drug so that it is regulated, it is more regulated. Okay, and it is subject to all these different quality standards that need to be met. So that's basically what I wanted to share with you guys. If you have any questions for me, feel free to drop them in the comments. I went on a bit of a tangent in between, but I think it is going to be quite insightful. And this applies to pretty much any compound that you use, okay? Be it a drug, a medicine, a supplement, a vitamin, a mineral, these are just labels. If there is a compound that you're taking, you need to evaluate its risks and its benefits. And if the benefits significantly outweigh the risks, then you can consider taking it. You apply this to every single thing. It doesn't even need to be a compound, it can be anything in life, okay? Anything that you are consuming, that you're doing to your body. And at the end of the day, it's a matter of having high standards for safety and exercising those standards. So that's okay. We have a question from Deepak. So all the anecdotes regarding BPC-157 are from some underground Chinese labs, or at least they're from reputed brands like Cordon, Eli. No, they're all Chinese. Cordon doesn't manufacture BPC-157. Eli Lilly does not manufacture BPC-157. That's the craziest part, right? So, and why should they? There's no real financial incentive for these companies to manufacture BPC 157, right? They're all busy making GLP 1 RAs because those are approved and they're making bank. So good for them. And maybe when we have enough data and if we find out that BPC 157 is actually efficacious and it's safe, they might start manufacturing them. Or if these peptides get added to the 503A list, then again the compounding pharmacies are, from what I from what I know, they're very expensive, and people are still going to rely on the Chinese ones. So it's not a permanent solution. What they're trying to do, okay, and there's something shady about this whole approval process also that happened. Not the approval process, but the advisory committee meeting that happened. So this basically hasn't really happened with any other compound which was so new and which lacked data and which hasn't really been prescribed for a long duration of time in clinical practice. Okay, so adding these compounds to the 503A bulks list is it's a bit it's very rare. That's all. That's what I'm saying. And even if they do add it, where are these guys going to get the API from? Because there are no API manufacturers in the USA who make BPC 157, the powder, the raw ingredient basically. I think there is one lab in the Europe, Zeta something, that might be making BPC 157, but that's about it. Even all anabolics are from Chinese labs. I know only testosterone salt is pharmaceutical grade. Rest other anabolics like these trinacetate. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So testosterone salt, the pharmaceutical grade testosterone, as far as I'm aware, that's the only approved anabolic steroid. That's the only approved drug. So that's the only thing these pharmaceutical companies can manufacture and sell. And even that's for TRT, right? There have been then TRT has been studied in humans. We have data on TRT. We know the risks. There are risks. It doesn't mean these compounds are risk free, but we know the risks and it's been approved for certain conditions. Okay, but this other stuff, like, good luck getting it approved. Good luck running trials also. There's no there's no way an ethics committee is going to like sit back and chill and be like, yeah, cool, test this out on a bunch of people. If they die, they die. If their liver stops working, no worries. At least we'll get data. That doesn't happen. It'll never happen. Okay, so you don't know where this other stuff is coming from. Some guy might be making it up, literally making it at home, putting it in a vial and shipping it out. It happens all the time. It happens with supplements also. And at that point, it's just, yeah, there are bigger things you'll have to worry about. Okay, do we have any more questions? Anything you guys would like to share? Also, another side note, okay, all of these evidence based people who are prescribing BPC-157 and other peptides, other research peptides left, right, and center without, like, for the smallest things, man. I see, like, someone sprained their ankle, yeah, shoot up BPC-157, you'll be fine. Absolutely unprofessional. Okay, it's the stupidest thing ever. And we've seen, again, there have been compounds in the past which were all the hype, but when we actually found out data about them, SARMs is one really, since we're speaking about anabolics, SARMs were they were huge. I remember a few years ago when they came out, the claims were insane. But then when we actually tested them out, a lot of pharmaceutical companies just abandoned the trials midway. So first of all, the anabolic effects weren't as great as people were claiming them to be. They had a modest effect, but the side effects were just insane. There was testosterone suppression, there was hepatotoxicity, a few other things. So even today, when the anecdotes on SARMs, you go look it up, they're positive as ever. There are new anecdotes coming out now also. And that's one more thing, okay? Just because someone used something and got away with it doesn't mean that's safe. Okay, there could be someone out there who used SARMs and it actually helped them build muscle and nothing apparent happened right away and they sort of got away with it. They are more likely to post their positive anecdote online. You don't hear about the people who, I mean, died obviously, but you also don't hear about the people who didn't see much of an effect at all. So, but with BPC 157, I have not come across a lot of overwhelmingly negative anecdotes, which is somewhat good, I guess. But yeah, it's easy to get swept away by the hype. I really wish it works too. Like, I really hope it does. It's something I would consider using as well. I'm completely pro using supplements. Anything that helps me improve my health, anything that makes me perform better, I'm willing to use it because why wouldn't I, right? But we need to make sure that we know the risks and the risks are worth it. Okay, do we have any other questions? I see I see one person is watching. Amazing session and have a great day. Good night. Thank you, Deepak. Thanks for joining in. Have a yeah, it's have a great day. It's the end of my day, but yeah, you too. Have a good night, and I will see you soon in another live. Okay, that's it. That's what I wanted to end on. So make responsible decisions. Okay, don't do something you'll regret later. Okay, because there are some concerns with using these compounds, and until we know for sure, okay, it's best not to. Because let's take it like this. Okay, so let's say you don't use BPC 157, and 20-30 years later, we have data and everything seems fine. There's no issues. Then great, you didn't miss out on anything. You can take it now. Okay. But let's say that we do find some issues with it. Let's say it fuels cancer cell growth. It fuels tumor growth, which is one of the mechanistic concerns right now. Not saying it absolutely does. We don't have data on it, but let's say we find out in the future, and you've been using BPC 157, and you end up getting cancer. So you get what I'm saying, right? The logical thing to do right now, the responsible thing to do, the safe thing to do is wait, okay, and explore the other safer tested forms of therapies and compounds that we already do have. put in the extra effort and wait it out. That's it. So, thanks everyone for joining. I really appreciate your attendance and your participation. This was awesome. Thanks, Deepak, for asking all the questions. Um, I'm sure, although I did go on a tangent for a bit, I'm pretty sure we got some nice insights, and people who weren't interested about peptides, I hope you guys also still got to learn something, and it was insightful for you too. Okay, so with that said, I will bring this session to an end, and thank you all again. I will see you soon on my next live. Bye.